Listening Comprehension, Vietnamese Standardized Test of English Proficiency, Ho Chi Minh City University of Education. In this section of the test, you will have an opportunity to demonstrate your ability to understand conversations and talks in English. There are 3 parts in this section with special directions for each part. Answer all the questions on the basis of what is stated or implied by the speakers in the recording. There will be time for you to read the instructions and you will have a chance to check your work. The recording will be played once only. Time allowance is about 40 minutes, including 5 minutes to transfer your answers to your answer sheet. Part 1. Questions 1 to 8. Directions. In this part, you will hear 8 short announcements, or instructions. There is 1 question for each announcement or instruction. For each question, choose the right answer, A, B, C or D. Then, on the answer sheet, find the number of the question and fill in the space that corresponds to the letter of the answer that you have chosen. Now, let's begin with the first question. First, you'll have some time to read the questions 1 to 8.
1.
For the month of April, everyone needs to mark the following dates on his or her calendar. We will have mandatory staff meetings on the 7th and the 21st. The meetings, as always, will run from 9 to 10:30 a.m. Please prepare a brief report on your department's current project for the April 21st meeting. On the 16th, there will be a representative here from our insurance provider. He will discuss changes to our health insurance packages. You can sign up to speak with him in person during lunch if you want to make changes to your plan. The deadline to enroll in the regional conference is Friday. Please let me know if you plan to attend. That's everything on the calendar for April. If you plan to attend. That's everything on the calendar for April.
2.
Attention staff. The Weather Service is issuing a severe weather warning for the immediate area beginning at 4 p.m. Due to the impending inclement weather, our offices will be closing at 3 o'clock. The forecast calls for severe thunderstorms with a chance of tornadoes. Please shut down and unplug all computers and other major electronic equipment. Please take home your laptops, the emergency calling procedures from your employee handbook, and any perishable food you may have in the refrigerators. The office will reopen at 7 a.m. tomorrow unless you are otherwise notified. Please drive safely. Please drive safely.
3.
Hello, Mr. Flores. This is Pamela calling from Miller Industrial Supply. Your recent order, reference number PQ276890, will ship ground delivery tomorrow at 8 a.m. However, the steel couplings, item number 29971, are on back order. That item will not ship until the 7th of next month. I am sorry for the inconvenience. We have adjusted your billing statement to reflect this change. Please call me back at 972-772-8301 at your convenience to confirm that you have received this message and to let me know if you want to cancel the back-ordered item or have it shipped at the later date. Thank you. Or have it shipped at the later date. Thank you.
4.
Would the owner of a green minivan, license plate number XHB-78S4, please report to the north parking lot immediately? The van is illegally parked. You are blocking a delivery truck and must move your vehicle immediately. The delivery truck cannot pass through to the unloading dock. Failure to move your vehicle in the next 10 minutes will result in towing and possible fines. Thank you for your immediate attention to this matter. Thank you for your immediate attention to this matter.
5.
Hello. You have reached the technical support line of Etherware Corp software. All our technical support representatives are busy assisting other customers. We value your call and look forward to the opportunity to serve you. Please do not hang up. Your call will be answered in the order in which it was received. You will be asked for the license number of your product. Please have this information on hand. Your approximate wait time is 9 minutes. Your approximate wait time is 9 minutes.
Six.
Welcome to our 12th Annual Regional Conference on Municipal Water Quality. Before I introduce our presenters, I would like to note a few changes to the printed schedule at the front of your folder. Please take note of the following changes. The workshop entitled The Future of Chlorine has been postponed. Due to the floods in Indianapolis, our presenter's flight was delayed. The Future of Chlorine workshop will now take place Wednesday in room 316. Also, the workshop called Piping Solutions has changed locations. It will be held in room 201. Please note these changes on your schedule. If you have not yet signed up for your workshops, you may do so in the lobby at the end of the convocation. Do so in the lobby at the end of the convocation.
Seven.
As you can see from the graph, our sales were up significantly in November from last year. October sales were down a little, but the boost in November more than makes up for that decline. Looking at the quarter as a whole, our growth remains steady, and we have met our sales goal for the quarter. I want to congratulate all of you on this success. Everyone has worked hard to meet this goal. Our team is strong and dedicated. Thank you for your hard work. To celebrate, the company will provide lunch for the whole staff on Friday. The company will provide lunch for the whole staff on Friday.
Eight.
This is an automated message from Main Street Bank concerning your business credit card account ending in 8370. In order to maintain the security of your account, we are calling to inform you of irregular account activity taking place on October 2nd. Please call our customer service line at 800-999-2900 or visit our website at www.mainstreetbank.com to confirm the purchase. The transaction will not post without your approval. Thank you for your prompt attention to this matter. Please understand that we have taken this measure solely to ensure your account's security. Thanks for this opportunity to serve you. The security of your account is very important to us. The security of your account is very important to us.
That is the end of part 1.
Part 2, questions from 9 to 20. In this part, you will hear 3 conversations. The conversations will not be repeated. There are 4 questions for each conversation. For each question, choose the correct answer, A, B, C or D.
Questions 9 to 12.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor.
Okay, Chris. Do you understand why I asked you to see me?
I guess so. I did something in class. I apologize.
But do you understand what's bothering me?
No, not really. I like your class.
I'm glad you do. But Chris, you're disturbing the other students with your constant talking.
I am?
Yes. I've had several people complain about it. They're missing key parts of the lecture because you're talking.
But I'm talking about the lecture. I'm not just making conversation.
Look, Chris, it doesn't matter. When I am talking, you should be listening.
Well, I'm sorry. Sometimes I don't get a word or a phrase, so I ask someone about it.
Okay, I really don't think you're creating a disturbance on purpose. If I did, I'd simply ask you to drop the class, period.
Oh, please don't do that.
That's not my plan, but it has to be an option. Look, maybe you need to record the lectures. I don't mind if you do that. Then you can fill in the blanks when you listen the second time instead of asking your neighbor during the class.
That's a great idea. I really wanted to do that, but I was thinking you probably wouldn't want me to.
And another thing, if you have questions, I need you to write them down and make an appointment to talk with me about them. That's why I have office hours twice a week. Just call the department and we'll arrange a time.
Excuse me, Dr. Pierce. Can I tell you something? I'm embarrassed to ask you questions.
Why in the world would that be? I ask for questions at the end of every lecture. I encourage students to use my office hours.
I know you do. It's just that where I went to school before I came here, if you asked a professor a question, it was an insult because it implied that he hadn't explained everything well. You see, if the professor does a good job on the lecture, everything will be clear and no one will need to ask a question.
I see. Well, it's different here. I'm not saying that your other experience is wrong. I'm just saying that we do things differently at the university in this country. In my class, I don't expect you to understand everything in the lectures, and I don't take it as a challenge when someone asks a question. I view the question as kind of a compliment, because it means that person is very interested and is really trying to learn. That's the kind of student I want.
So I can ask you questions in class.
Or in my office. Just don't ask other students questions while I'm trying to give my lecture. That does upset me.
Oh, Professor Pierce, I'm so sorry. I was trying to be respectful. I'm interested in the class and I want to know everything.
I see that. Now I'm asking you to show your interest and respect in a different way. I want you to ask me the questions at the times that I provide for question and answer, at the end of the lecture and during my office hours.
And I can record the lectures?
Yes. Just don't make a lot of noise in class, okay?
Oh, no, I won't. Thank you so much.
Questions 13 to 16.
Listen to part of a conversation between two students.
Hi, how'd your presentation go?
Really well.
See, I told you.
I know, but I was really nervous.
So what happened?
Well, the TA asked for volunteers to go first, and I raised my hand right away because I wanted to get it over with before I got any more nervous than I already was.
So you went first?
Yeah, and I used a lot of visuals. I had about 20 slides on PowerPoint, and that really helped me to stay on track. I mean, I didn't read the slides to the class or anything, but you know, some of the titles kind of jogged my memory. So I knew what I wanted to say while each slide was shown.
That's the beauty of PowerPoint.
Of course, I'm always afraid the computer program won't work, and then there I am without anything. But I made overheads, you know, copies of all the slides just in case.
So you could have used the overhead projector as a backup. Good idea.
And I had most of the stuff on handouts, so they could follow along without spending a lot of time taking notes. That way I could move along faster and get more in 10 minutes.
Yeah, 10 minutes isn't very long when you're trying to present something as complex as population density.
That's for sure. The maps really helped.
A picture's worth 1,000 words.
So true.
Listen, I can't remember whether you had a group or you had to present all by yourself.
You had a choice, but I decided to do my own presentation. I don't know. Group projects are really popular, but, you know.
I hear you. I'd rather take responsibility for the whole presentation if I were you.
No surprises that way.
Is that one of your handouts? Wow, that looks fantastic.
It's easy. PowerPoint has an option for putting the slides on a handout.
Still, it looks so professional.
Thanks.
So, did you have any questions after the presentation?
Not really. I think people were mostly just wanting to get on with their own presentations.
But they seemed interested.
Oh, yeah. And the TA said something about getting off to such a good start. So I felt good about that.
Questions 17 to 20.
Listen to a conversation in a professor's office.
Thanks for seeing me.
No problem. What?
I'm here. Oh, excuse me.
Go ahead.
I'm here 'cause, well, I just don't seem to be able to keep up with the assignments.
I see. Is that just in my class, or is this a general problem?
Oh, no. I'm getting behind in my assignments in all my classes. There's just so much. It's overwhelming. But I came to you because I thought you could give me some advice.
Well, I'll try. So how many classes are you taking?
4, which is about average, I think.
And what are they?
Sorry?
Which classes are you taking?
Oh, well, I have Western Civilization, World Literature, your class in Psychology, of course, and Philosophy.
Uh-huh. Well, that's the problem. All of your courses are reading-intensive classes.
If you mean that I have a lot of reading to do, that's the truth.
Look, when you registered, did you talk with your advisor?
Not really.
But you had to have your advisor's signature in order to complete the registration process.
Yeah, but I just had him sign it. I didn't really make an appointment or anything. See, I thought the best thing to do was to get all of my required courses out of the way so I could spend the last 2 years concentrating on my major.
And that's a good plan. But the problem is that you selected 4 courses that have heavy reading assignments and probably papers to write in addition to tests, right?
Right. But most courses have a lot of reading, don't they?
Some have more than others. And that's what I mean by a reading-intensive class. Listen, if you'd taken a lab course, like botany or chemistry, well, then you would have had one course with a textbook and another course with a small lab manual. Now you'd have had to spend time in the lab to finish your experiments, but you would have received credit for 2 courses, and you wouldn't have had any papers to write, just tests.
Oh, I see. And with the literature, I have 8 books to read, plus the textbook, and there are, how many? 4 or 5 books in your class.
So when you register, you really need to think about the course requirements so you aren't putting all of your reading-intensive courses together in the same semester.
Like I did this time. So maybe it's not that I'm such a slow reader. Maybe I just have too much to read.
Could be. In any case, the schedule has to be at least part of the problem.
So what should I do now?
Okay. Well, how are you doing in your classes?
I'm getting B's and C's, but I know I could get A's if I had more time in the day. And I'm really worried about those C's.
Well, here's a possibility. Why don't you drop one of your courses, the one that takes the most time?
That would be my literature class.
Well, you could take it next semester. It's offered every term, and you'd have some of the reading done already.
But wouldn't that mess up my graduation date?
I don't know. You'd have to check that with your advisor to be sure.
But maybe the professor would be upset about my dropping the class. Then next semester, when I show up again...
You could talk with the professor and explain your plan. But if you decide to do this, you'll need to do it right away because there's a cutoff date for dropping a course. And I think it's the end of this month.
I wish I hadn't gotten myself into this.
Well, the main thing is to learn from it.
So next semester, I could take some reading-intensive courses and some that are less reading-intensive.
And you really should see your academic advisor when you're selecting courses next time. To talk, I mean, not just for a signature.
This is the end of part 2. Move on to part 3.
Part 3, questions 21 to 35. In this part, you will hear 3 talks or lectures. The talks or lectures will not be repeated. There are 5 questions for each talk or lecture. For each question, choose the right answer, A, B, C or D. Questions 21 to 25.
Listen to part of a lecture in an art class.
Symmetry is a concept that, yes, is expressed in the graphic arts, but to understand its fundamental nature, we must go beyond art. We find symmetry in nature. It reverberates in music, translates into choreography for dance, and underlies basic mathematical formulas. But I'm getting ahead of myself. let's begin with a dictionary definition of symmetry. And I'm reading here from the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language. Symmetry is exact correspondence of form and constituent configuration on opposite sides of a dividing line or plane, or about a center or an axis. And it's also identified, in the same source, as beauty as a result of balance or harmonious arrangement. So we experience beauty and harmony when symmetry of form is expressed, and the form may be interpreted by any of the senses as harmonious. But in this class, we're going to focus on symmetry in the visual arts, and that's symmetry in a visual plane. Let's just look at some examples. In general, there are 4 types of symmetry in a plane, and a pattern is symmetrical if there's at least one type of symmetry. So let me show you the 4 types, since it's much easier to understand when you see them. This is rotation symmetry. For this example, I used the letter R, but any object could have been used. And in the rotation, the object, in this example, the letter R, is turned around a center. In this case, there's a right angle, but any angle could have been selected. Reflection is... Wait a minute. Okay, here's the slide. Reflection is what we see in a mirror, so every reflection has a mirror line. A reflection of the letter R is a mirror image or a backwards letter R. So, unlike the rotation around a circle, this type of symmetry flips the object over. Here's a translation. To translate an object means that we move it, but we do it without rotation or reflection. It's simply placed somewhere else on the plane. And for our purposes, we're talking about a flat plane. So, in this example, we just moved it over a little bit. Okay, this is my last example of symmetry, and it's referred to as glide reflection. This is the most complex type of symmetry because it involves 2 steps instead of 1. A glide reflection is a combination of a reflection and a translation along the direction of the mirror line. So you can see the 2 steps here. First, we flip it over, and then we move it somewhere else on the plane. Of course, these concepts can be generalized to include spatial symmetry as well. But symmetry on a flat plane involves positioning all points around the plane so their positions in relationship to each remain constant, although their absolute positions may be subject to change. To put it in simple terms, if an object looks the same to you after you spin it around, flip it over, or look at it in a mirror, then that object probably has symmetry. Symmetry is such a fundamental organizing principle that an object with symmetry can be identified without our being able to see the entire object. Our brains somehow piece together the missing pieces to form a symmetrical whole, which is really rather extraordinary when you think about it. At some very basic level, symmetry may be part of the way that we organize our thinking, and of course that would explain why it's so pleasing. So now let's return to symmetry in art. Symmetry stands out and attracts attention. It's the system of organization for patterns. But what is a pattern? A pattern has 3 characteristics: a system for organization, and like we said before, this is often symmetry, but a pattern also has a basic unit. That is, it's an object that's the smallest discrete part of the image. As you'll recall from the types of symmetry that we discussed, the letter R was the basic unit. Okay, finally, a pattern has repetition, which can be the repetition of a unit or a group of units. And this repetition, in much of art, this repetition is arranged symmetrically. Just look around the classroom. Look at the tiles on the floor. Here you see a symmetrical design with 4 repeating tiles. The tiles were not placed at random. There's a pattern here with all 3 characteristics of a pattern. First, there's a unit, a basic unit of 4 tiles. Second, there's repetition of the tiles with solid tiles surrounding them. And third, there's symmetry within the 4 tiles, which, to be specific, looks like rotation symmetry to me. Now, for your studio assignment, I want you to draw a pattern that has as its organizing principle a symmetrical design. It can be either in color or in black and white, but it must fit on a piece of standard 8.5 by 11-inch paper. On a second sheet of paper, I want you to identify the type of symmetry that you used. Perhaps some of you will want to experiment with several types of symmetry, but if you do, please be sure to identify each of them clearly in your narrative. For this first effort, I recommend that you stick to something relatively simple, like the tile floor. So when you come to class next week, be ready to share your design with 3 other people in a group. Then I'll collect them at the end of the hour.
Questions 26 to 30.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
By studying the fossil record, we can read the history of life on Earth. Interestingly enough, it appears that there are long periods in which not very much change occurs, then sporadic brief periods in which there are mass extinctions of species, followed by diversification of the groups that survived. How does this happen? Well, sometimes a habitat's destroyed or the environment changes. Did you know that if the temperature of the ocean falls by even a few degrees, many species will die? Incredible, isn't it? Or, even when the environment's relatively stable, biological conditions can change when other species evolve in different directions. For example, let's see, when a similar species evolves by developing a shell, then the related species without shells may be more vulnerable to predators and could become extinct as a result of changes in the other species. So you can see that extinction's a natural consequence of history. It's, well, inevitable. But sometimes mass extinctions occur and most of the known species are lost, and this is very different. Let me mention 2 such mass extinctions. First, the Permian mass extinction, which occurred about 250 million years ago. According to fossil records, more than 90% of the marine species and about 30% of the orders of insects perished. Then about 65 million years ago, the Cretaceous mass extinction claimed more than half of the marine species and many terrestrial species of plants and animals, including the dinosaurs. So what causes mass extinction? This isn't an easy question to answer. You see, it's obvious from the fossil records that species exist during a certain geological time period, and then they disappear. And we have solid evidence for that. But why they disappear is, well, more speculative. In the Permian, several extreme conditions may have converged, including the merging of the continents into one large landmass. As you can imagine, such a radical change in the distribution of land and water would have disturbed habitats and caused the climate to change. There's also evidence that volcanic activity during this period may have produced enough carbon dioxide to cause global warming, which in turn would have affected the temperature and depth of the oceans. And I'm referring here to global warming, so it probably also caused the oxygen levels in the oceans to decrease. All of these conditions could have converged to extinguish an enormous number of species at the same time. That's mass extinction. And a similar set of conditions may also have contributed to the mass extinction in the Cretaceous period as well. We can gather data that convinces us about continental drift, that it occurred along with receding seas along the continental coastlines. In addition, we know that cooler climate was probably the result, at least in part, of increased volcanic eruptions, and these eruptions probably released enough material into the atmosphere to block the sunlight. Having said all of that, many scientists now favor a very different hypothesis. They theorize that maybe a large asteroid collided with the Earth. Advocates of the so-called impact hypothesis speculate that there were 2 events that caused the mass extinction. First, the impact probably caused a firestorm of such proportion that most of the life in North America would have been decimated within minutes. Second, they postulate that an enormous cloud of fallout could have blocked out the sunlight, and that the impact was, in fact, large enough to darken the Earth. And we're talking about months or even years. So the result of the darkness, that would have caused a reduction in photosynthesis, which in turn would have created a disruption in the food chain. Now, such a disruption would have affected many species. So the advocates of the impact hypothesis, they put forward evidence that a thin layer of clay, rich in iridium deposits, can be found in the geologic material that separates the Mesozoic and the Cenozoic eras, precisely the time period for the Cretaceous mass extinction. So what's special about this clay? Well, iridium's a very rare element on Earth, but it's quite common in meteorites and other extraterrestrial debris that's been analyzed. So it's possible that this sediment is the remains of the impact. The fact that there was more serious damage to the species in the Western Hemisphere could also be explained by the point of impact, and the fact that the dust cloud could have caused more acidic precipitation nearer the area of impact. Or there may have been a number of calamities that converged simultaneously, disrupting planetary balances. But whatever the cause or causes, the fact remains that the mass extinctions occurred, and they influenced the biological diversity of our planet in profound ways. The species that survived, whether because they had genetic advantages or because they were fortunate enough to be farther from the catastrophes, these species became the ancestors of the species that have played important roles in biological evolutionary history.
Questions 31 to 35.
Listen to part of a discussion in a sociology class. The professor is talking about gangs.
Last class, I asked you to read some articles about gang activity. We're trying to come up with a definition, so let's just go around the table and share what we found. Tracy, will you begin, please?
Okay. Actually, I read a review of the research for sociological studies on gang activity, and I found that gangs have been prevalent for much longer than I'd assumed. I was so surprised. For some reason, I thought that gang activity was a fairly recent phenomenon, but actually, one of the largest studies was carried out by Thrasher in 1936.
Good, good. I'm pleased that you found that. Thrasher's study's a classic research investigation. Can you summarize the findings of the Thrasher study?
Sure. First, I should say that the study included more than 1,300 gangs with more than 25,000 members. So, according to Thrasher, a gang is a group that may form spontaneously, but after that, it'll integrate, and that happens through conflict and violence. Over time, a spirit of solidarity and an attachment to a local territory kind of forms. What's most interesting, besides the long history of gangs in the United States, the interesting part, it's the fact that not much has changed over the years. And, yes, gang behavior seems pretty similar, even across cultures.
That is interesting.
Dr. Jackson, may I go next? I have just a brief comment that seems to fit in here.
Please.
Well, another classic study, much later, about 1987 or 8, I think, by Joan Moore. That study indicated that gang behavior is probably caused by normal adolescent insecurities, the desire for peer approval, respect, support, acceptance, and, in some cases, protection, if the neighborhood's perceived as dangerous. It seems that gangs take the place of the more childish cliques, those in-groups that develop in high schools.
Good point. And if we can refer back to the Thrasher study, he also suggested that gangs actually form in playgroups where children of a very young age begin with the usual games like hide-and-seek or kickball and progress as they get older to playing craps or engaging in petty theft on the street. Now back to Moore. Bill?
Right. Well...
What about Moore's definition of a gang? That relates to the Thrasher study.
Oh, I see what you mean. I have that right here. Moore defined a gang as an unsupervised peer group who is socialized by the streets rather than by conventional institutions. And I was thinking that the institutions might be schools, churches, organized clubs like boys' clubs. And one other thing, Moore emphasized that the gang had to define itself as a gang, You know, with some kind of criteria for membership that'd be recognized by all the gang members.
Such as?
Such as participating in a crime. Either stealing something and bringing it back to the gang, or even killing someone in an initiation.
Dr. Jackson, I looked up the definitions of gang members by police departments and law enforcement agencies.
Oh, great. Let's hear it.
Okay. Well, according to the California Youth Gang Task Force, for example, a gang member will be recognizable because of gang-related tattoos, clothing, and paraphernalia like scarves and hats that identify a particular gang, and sometimes these are called the colors. So that allows other people to confirm that the people with the colors on, that they have a right to be on the gang's turf. And to follow up on Tracy's comments about the history of gangs, it looks like these criteria have been in place for a long, long time.
Good job. So far, what I'm hearing refers to gang membership in general. So now let's talk about the ages of gang members. Typically, who belongs to a gang?
Well, this was an eye-opener. There seem to be stages, or maybe not stages, but at least categories of gang membership. It starts about age 10 or 12, which fits in with what you were saying earlier about playgroups. So these kids are playing together and they start writing graffiti on their school lockers or their notebooks, and they look up to the gang members who are about 14 to 20. So the little kids are peewees and the teenagers are called gangbangers. But the members who are 20 to 25 years old, they're the hardcores, and most of the gangs that I read about didn't have very many members over 25 years old. So I would say that, in general, gang membership's for young men.
Thanks for your assessment of membership by age. And I'd certainly agree with you. But what about females? Did anyone find any research on their role in gang activity?
I did. And there are a few girl gangs. That's what they called them in the references. But I found that females are generally not considered members of the male-dominated gang. They're viewed as more of a support system and an extended social group, friends and girlfriends to party with.
That's what I found too. And another interesting thing, maybe this is naive, but I sort of imagined that gang activity was always criminal activity. But according to a study it was James Lasley, he looked at gangs in Los Angeles about 10 years ago. And anyway, he found that they spent a lot of time hanging out, listening to music, drinking beer, and just partying with their girlfriends. And he made another good point. Since they don't have spending money to go places like the movies or ball games, the neighborhood is their entertainment.
Yeah, I read that study.